The mechanic had heard many strange things in his life, but nothing froze him in place like the tiny, trembling voice of a child on a quiet, sunlit afternoon. The workshop fan hummed lazily overhead, the smell of grease clung to the warm air, and outside, the dusty street shimmered beneath the unforgiving daylight. But everything around him blurred when he turned and saw her, small, pale, leaning against the doorway of his repair shop as though standing upright itself was a victory she wasn't sure she'd win. Her eyes, a haunting mixture of fear and hope, locked onto his as she whispered the words that would alter the rest of his life. If you carry me up the stairs, I'll tell you a secret. If you believe in kindness, second chances, or the simple power of helping someone who needs it, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel RW Insights. Your support lets more stories like this find the hearts that need them. Harlan Vestry was not the type of man people expected to be a hero. He was 46, worn by the sun and by years of turning bolts no one else wanted to fix. He carried guilt heavier than any toolbox, guilt about a brother he couldn't save, a past he couldn't outrun, and dreams he'd quietly extinguished long ago. Yet when he saw the girl swaying on her feet, clutching her small chest as if holding herself together, something inside him broke open. He didn't ask who she was, or how she'd gotten there. He simply stepped forward, wiped his hands on his faded overalls, and knelt down. She weighed almost nothing when he scooped her into his arms, as though the world had taken too much from her already. Her skin felt feverishly warm, her breath shallow, but her expression softened the moment she felt supported. The stairs she wanted were the ones leading to the abandoned apartment above his shop, a place he hadn't entered in years. He carried her slowly, afraid she might slip away between one breath and the next. As they ascended, sunlight filtered through the cracked stairwell window, dust motes dancing in the beams like tiny spirits guiding them upward. When he reached the top, she clung to his shirt as though afraid he'd vanish. He gently set her on the old sofa, its fabric faded from time but still sturdy. She lay back, exhaling shakily, and Harlan felt his chest tighten. She couldn't have been more than 8. He sat beside her, unsure of what to do next, but she reached for his wrist, holding it with surprising strength. She told him her name was Mira Jalen, and she said it like she wasn't sure how many more times she'd get to. Between breaths, she explained she lived 3 blocks away with her grandmother, who was too frail to carry her anymore. Mira suffered from a rare condition, something Harlan didn't recognize but felt the weight of instantly. She often struggled to breathe when climbing stairs, and today, she had tried to go outside on her own because her grandmother had fallen asleep, exhausted from caring for her. Harlan felt anger rise, not at Mira, not at her grandmother, but at himself and the world. He had spent so many years isolated in bitterness after losing his younger brother, Owen, to illness. He had promised never to let himself get close to anyone again. Yet here was life, knocking on his door in the form of a fragile child asking to be carried up a staircase he had long abandoned. When Mira finally remembered her secret, her lips lifted into the faintest smile. She told him she came to the shop because she saw him every morning from her window. She watched him fix engines with patience, muttering to himself, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying when he thought no one saw. She said he reminded her of someone fighting invisible storms but still choosing to show up each day. "I wanted to tell you something important," she whispered. "I think you're a good person, even when you don't think so yourself." Harlan didn't realize he was shaking until tears blurred his vision. He had spent years hiding his grief, believing the world had no place for a broken man. But this child, this delicate little stranger, saw through him as though kindness was a language she spoke fluently. He stayed with her until she felt strong enough to be carried back home. On the walk, neighbors peeked through windows, shocked to see the reclusive mechanic carrying a fragile girl with more tenderness than they believed he possessed. When they reached her house, Myra's grandmother, Irisma, burst into tears of relief. She invited Harlan inside, insisting he stay for tea, telling him Mira rarely opened up to anyone. Over the next weeks, Mira became the light Harlan didn't realize his shop had been missing. She visited often, sometimes carried, sometimes walking slowly, each time bringing stories, drawings, or tiny pockets of laughter. Harlan fixed her broken toys, built small wooden animals for her, and found himself leaving the shop windows open just so he could hear her calling his name from down the street. But illness doesn't negotiate, and one warm morning, as the sunlight stretched long and gold across the workshop floor, Mira didn't appear at the doorway. Harlan tried to continue working, but his heart beat unevenly. When he finally rushed to her home, he found Irisma trembling, saying Mira had taken a bad turn. Without a second thought, he lifted the girl, now weaker than ever, and carried her again, this time not up forgotten stairs but through desperate streets toward the nearest clinic. Mira, gasping for breath, rested her head against his chest. She whispered one final secret, one that would stay with him forever. She told him she wasn't afraid of what came next because meeting him had made her feel brave. That, for the first time in a long time, she believed people were put in each other's lives for reasons she couldn't fully see. "If you hadn't carried me that day," she murmured, "I think my heart would have given up sooner." Harlan reached the clinic doors just as the sun struck the rooftop, bathing them in fierce daylight. Doctors rushed forward as he whispered to Mira that she wasn't alone. Whether it was hours or minutes later, the news came: her condition was critical but treatable if they acted fast. The mechanic who once believed he had nothing left to give found himself fighting for her life as though she were family. And when she finally opened her eyes days later, weak but alive, Harlan felt something shift inside him. Not the return of the man he once was, but the beginning of the man he could become. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to RW Insights. Your engagement helps these emotional stories reach others who may need hope today. Special request: comment, carry kindness forward if Myra's courage inspired you.